without further ado, let's bring this thing to order. Has anybody got any comments about the minutes in the previous meeting?
Pretty complete to me.
They were good. Thank goodness Joanne could join us again today.
She's the best.
She's a beacon in the darkness. What did we actually talk about? So, anybody want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion, we approve the moments from the
Moments from the
May 8th meeting.
Okay. Approve the minutes from the moments.
Yeah, those ones.
Seconded. Second. Moving second. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Now I have one communication, which I think I should just read into the minutes. It's short and sweet. It's from David Delinsky. He can't be here tonight. He says, Todd, I am out of town and will not be able to attend to Tuesday's meeting. My opinion is that we remain committed to WMC's recommended plan with the bend, in quotes, being the siting for the treatment facility. We would also be committed to do everything possible to make the facility as unobtrusive as possible. So, that's one man's opinion. Anybody have any other communications, any other letters they want to share relative to the meeting? Okay. And are there any visitors specific to introduce? We're all pretty much here. Okay, I'm going to start once again by reading the letter that I sent out, just in order to set a framework for things to talk about at this meeting, it being the final meeting of the year, or at least until we meet again, which we'll have to decide how that goes. But I think that it's important that we stay, this is what's known as a special meeting, I've been told, because I changed the date, and it wasn't on the regular calendar, so as such it becomes a special meeting. Therefore, there's not allowed to be any additions to the agenda, as you notice on the agenda, I said. And we have to only talk about an item that's on the agenda, so it's a pretty broad topic, but these are the specifics. So to that subject, I'll just read this letter. Whoops. That's my wife. She's probably telling me, don't forget the water septic. Okay, so hello fellow West Cornwall Water Septic Committee members. If you scroll down, you will see I've attached Gordon's email to us that refers to efforts he has made to find what he has described to me as a quest for a, quote, elegant solution to our aspiration for community septic for West Cornwall. In this journey, he has spoken with representatives from the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities to gain broader insight about creative options we may be missing. It is bad news that at the state level, a bill to encourage innovative septic systems died in committee. The CCM has provided a wealth of information on possible alternative solutions. We are going to hear more about the CCM and its mandate at our meeting and what that bill looked like. As I prepare for this final meeting before the summer hiatus, I will read as many of the attached articles and follow the embedded links to absorb as much of this information as possible. I urge you all to do the same. It is fortuitous that this recommended reading list has arrived just at this moment in our work. I'm sure all of you are aware that we have encountered a serious impediment to our already extremely challenging goal to find a community solution to the wastewater problems that are impeding the vitality of the West Cornwall hamlet. Although the work WMC Engineers has accomplished has much to commend as far as specific options for us to consider, it cannot be denied that we are on the horns of a dilemma. Were we to choose the option with the lowest price tag, there is substantial concern from those living close by the facility. To move the site and utilize the open land for a leaching option, thereby placing the structure in a less contentious setting, we increase the cost, perhaps prohibitively. Citing an innovative alternative I/A system down near the bend that utilizes the Housatonic River as a final leaching mechanism would require a decision-making capacity far beyond our mandate. Has the time come to pass off the torch to the selectmen and stand back so the broader community can begin the debate over whether to spread the cost and future burden of such a venture across the whole community? We are going to discuss this at our meeting, and we are going to explore a way to preserve the work we have done to date so it will not die in vain. In a quick read of these articles, it appears there could, in fact, be other options. We owe it to ourselves and the community to dig deeper to perhaps find that elusive, elegant solution. It is entirely possible that these systems being utilized in the rural areas of Maine or studied in Massachusetts have truly profound value for our predicament. The attached articles seem to indicate that there are technologies available for IA systems servicing a small community like ours that use leach fields requiring far less acreage than the WMC and or the Connecticut DEP have offered as allowable. I find this both sweet and sour, puzzled by the inability of our political process to lead us to solutions proven effective for communities facing parallel struggles. The ultimate battle to fight could well be one that brings the seemingly disparate groups within this process together and finds a way for us all to agree that if this is what we want our town to look like, it is up to us to find a way from here to there. We will also talk about this at our meeting. Hope to see you on Tuesday. Best time. So, we've touched on a bunch of stuff in here, and it's the question is how to kind of sequence these ideas and these concepts. I think that one of the things I would like to say, and it's far from a vote, so I don't have hard facts, but I'm getting an overwhelming sense that most of Cornwall feels something needs to be done to assist in the vitality here in West Cornwall. So, on that note, I'll kick off some discussion, and if anybody wants to weigh in, or if Gordon, you want to segue to something else, let me know. And do you have a similar feeling?
Well, I have feelings, but I'd rather hear from the committee before I mean, I'd be glad to speak first, or I can speak last, but,
Okay.
you know,
But on
whatever I have might color other people's comments, so
On that subject,
Be
does
glad to
anybody
make
on the
comments.
committee have any other opinions or any other input?
Okay,
Yeah.
we're having a problem with the site, where we put the site.
Correct.
Now, the HVA is going to be putting in a boat dock, and a boat ramp there, and a porta potty, somehow.
Right.
Is there any way we could utilize whatever they're gonna put in there as, you know, and combine it with what our treatment system would be? So it wouldn't be, oh,
Well, a porta potty is
Well,
sort of the polar opposite of a treatment system.
I know, but this bathroom, yeah.
Yeah, well, and there have been porta potties there before. Most of them get pushed over,
Oh, okay.
in my experience. That's not to say this one's going to be. It's got to get emptied quite a bit and that kind of thing, but it's
Well, they've
hardly
always been
a...
there on a limited
solution.
basis, right? Porta potties.
There have been, yeah, over the years I've been here, we've had a number of occasions where we paid for
Yeah,
porta
for
potties.
events.
Yeah, kayak races though.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we used to, when we had an economic group here in town, we used to pay to have them in there, but nobody
That's not.
followed them up.
So I could fill in that piece a little bit.
Uh-huh.
The HVA, as people probably know, has gotten a grant to upgrade the parking lot at the Bend. And it's gone through a new iteration as there was concerns about the ancient factory that was underneath there. So they've come back to the town with a more modest, less obtrusive design that still accomplishes some of the original goals, which were to have good parking in the village, to have a public facility that is used so people have an option there, to have improved fire access, to have a better, by getting a ramp down to the river, to also have decent or better, more welcoming kayak and canoe access. So that's, if it makes it, it probably will make its way through the town regulatory process. It's going to P&Z next month. The selectmen have endorsed the concept, and it will come up to a town meeting probably in August. So it does not excavate out the site. It basically fills and levels the parking lot. I think there's 15 spots. There's a gate, and as part of that, the town would have a license to use all the Eversource property from right outside this building through the bend. Now that's for, limited passive recreation purposes. It does not give the town permission to use it for a sewage treatment plant, which is obviously much more permanent. Everything here, again, would have to be, if CL or Eversource, either party can pull out of the license if they want to do it, 30-day notice, and the town would then have to move the gravel and the porta potty and probably the fence, and we'd be done. Similarly, if it became a public nuisance and the townspeople said it's not worth it, let's lock the gate, let's get rid of it. But it's our feeling that it's a significant enough improvement, it hits enough points that the townspeople should have a vote on it, whether they want to do it or not. HVA has a grant that won't last forever to make these improvements, and that's where we're going to be at this summer. Now, this license does not preclude, and the parking lot doesn't preclude there being a septic treatment plant there, but it also in no way enables it, other than it puts the land under town control very tentatively. This mechanism isn't even recorded on the land records. So if it does create a problem or something happens, the town in the future can't back out of this arrangement. So to me, our job is to try to move things forward to get the best possible arrangement, up to the town voters to decide what eventually happens. Do they want to do it? Do they want to keep it the way it is? Then it's up.
Are you
Eventually
talking
we'll
about
be
the Bend project?
Well, I'm talking about the Bend project.
Okay.
Specifically, we're going to have a vote on that probably in the next month or so.
Right.
And as I said, that doesn't, it's the same piece of property, but it doesn't begin to really preclude or enable
Right,
the sewer part of this.
Right, but how do we develop or generate a mechanism that can identify whether or not there's a sufficient feeling within the town that some kind of a community septic is probably a good idea? Is there some way to frame that question in such a way that a town-wide vote can happen?
It probably can, but I think that unlike the parking lot and the porta potty, which are very easy to understand, the cost, how that scheme would work, the work that's been done to date by the committee has been very good as a first step. But as I said before, I don't think that we really have enough complete information on that as well as the alternatives. And one thing that has happened when this, taking nothing away from the report, because I think it is a good first step and it's farther than the town's ever got. And I think there is a consensus that something in some sort needs to be done.
Okay, so that's an
But
important thing
I
you
think,
just said. You
yeah, I
think
think
there's a
there's some,
consensus.
well, I mean, I think there's some consensus that could
Some
be done.
consensus.
But I'm not sure there's a consensus around this report, which I think they're two different things. Should something be done? Should this report be carried out? And in order to really carry out, to have an intelligent conversation, you have to have a bunch of questions answered that we don't know the answers to at
Right,
this
I mean,
point.
it's a cart before the horse
Well,
kind
or-
of conundrum for sure, because we don't know whether to keep this committee alive to continue pursuing this issue if in fact there's not sufficient interest in the town to emplace this kind of a, I mean, if we could say to the town, look, under the best of circumstances, we can come up with a plan that everybody can kind of get behind, meaning its cost is correct, its placement is correct, would you support it? And then they'd vote and probably, yeah, they would support it. But we can't get to that place because we don't know whether or not we have the town's support on pursuing that. I mean, we
Well-
could spend years just kind of spinning our wheels here.
You won't know until a vote happens, but in order to really take a vote forward, we need more information on several fronts. Whether the committee should stay in
Okay,
business,
so
I
we've got
can,
one piece of information,
I can,
which is in the report.
I can answer. I think the committee or a committee should keep on looking at this issue for the near term. And there may need to be more work done at looking at some of these creative alternatives that we think are out there.
Right,
We
but
don't know.
if there's not sufficient community support for doing it, then there's no point in spending that kind of time. We've got to somehow flesh out, it's not just the people who are sited across the street from it. It's got to be, you know, the whole town has got to somehow weigh in on whether or not they want this to happen within the town. I mean, they could well say,
How do we ask them?
yeah, exactly, they could well say, well, we'd like this to happen as long as it doesn't negatively impact anybody within the community.
Then we'll have to go have an up or down vote at the end.
Right, and negatively impact as a whole host of
Right.
issues.
But I think originally when this was proposed, the vision was this was going to be sort of a self-reliant, self-financed by the people in the
Okay, see, I
village.
never saw it that way.
We-
It's
I mean, at
impossible,
least-
way too expensive.
Well, we didn't even know, I said early on, we can't tell if we're for or against it because we don't know how much it's going to cost.
Well, we do.
Well, I mean, we don't now, but when we started, the
Right.
thought was maybe this is a $1 or $2 million fixes out there. If there's a $1 or $2 million fix, it's a lot different than a $5 or $6 million fix. So now that we know that, things have changed in that the cost per unit is so high that it obviously has to have town involvement. If this was a self-reliant funding mechanism, then that's a different discussion. And the
Right.
more the town is going to be asked to participate, the more research that has to be done for what are the other alternatives, because it's not just the users that are using it. And the more you read, most places are user financed. But if we take the step and say the townspeople townwide are going to have to pay for it, then we are going to be asked even more questions. Is this the best solution for the area?
Right.
So I would think if we haven't had the
perhaps
answer to that question, we need to know, the committee needs, or a committee needs to spend more time.
Right.
And it has to be that, I talked to the first selectman in Sabre. They've been at this for 20 years. That's hopefully, I mean, that's the reality. He said the septic issues are the most difficult he has to face within his job.
Sure.
I mean, that's the reality of septic. You got costs, you got property values, you got,
Maintenance.
it's not my problem. It gets to the core of people's life savings. It's who pays, all this other
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
I'm not causing the problem. So,
Yeah.
I think there needs to be some more investigation on these alternatives systems, is my thought. So-
Any other committee members want to weigh in? Libby, do you have some,
Yeah, I
input.
do.
Go
I
ahead.
agree that there should, I personally think that what should happen, because I have zero hope of this working in this format. I believe that what should happen is that we should figure out, I don't know if it means changing law in the state, as Joanne had asked Brian and Craig to look into, or imitating Massachusetts and New York because they have the less leaching field requirements and, things
so-
like that. I don't know what it has to take, but I don't think this route to me is just like, for this committee to go another 18 months like this, really doesn't, what
so you feel we found the solution,
we,
but,
I
or you feel
personally-
there's another solution, but the state is has put up too.
They put up too many roadblocks on the leach field requirement and having these innovative systems.
So let's talk about that. Do you know what that bill looked like that died in this
I don't know what it looked-
Congress? It's the state Congress, right? Was it in the House of Representatives? Was it in the Senate?
It's in the state legislature.
Right.
And there was a bill that made it through a committee but didn't make it all the way through. Now, what that actually said, I don't know. But
Well, it
through,
might be worth finding that out.
sure, and I
Yeah.
mean, as I said to the Connecticut Council of Municipalities, this issue doesn't just impact West Cornwall, it impacts all of Cornwall. The cost of disposing septic, somebody gave me a toilet of the world's book to look at. I mean, there's a lot of different solutions out there,
Yeah.
from very primitive to, electronics, So, but I did talk to the first selectman down in Saybrook today too, and he said, that's a much bigger place, and they're doing in-ground systems. They've been under a consent order from DEP. They're working with DEP. They're replacing hundreds of septic fields in their town, and everything's staying underground because they cannot put it into the other one, the Long Island Sound. So I said, I've been down to Saybrook. There's that big yellow place, the big hotel. It's got to have it has probably 100 bedrooms. It's right on the shore. What are they doing? He said they're treating that on site with a very expensive, very green recirculating system on the surface. And Steve might be able to enter in on this, that some of those, they have a Stop and Shop, they have a Kohl's, they have these shopping centers that treat it all on site. That's the deal. The town only works on the residential system, of which they have 1,200 that they are renovating. This is all without a centralized plan. But they have these other commercial buildings that are being built and have been built in the last several years with DEP approval that are treating the stuff with a green system that recirculates water, does a bunch of different stuff. And he said, come on down, we'll go to lunch. So to me, that's the next stop.
Do we have to drink the water?
Anyway, but he also said one thing too. What?
What town is that?
This is Saybrook.
Old
And-
Saybrook.
Yeah, so,
Old Saybrook?
and I think Steve has been on the edge of that issue a little bit. It's not just Old Saybrook, but it's Madison, it's 3 or 4
Yeah, it's
towns.
all
in
the
the same-
shoreline towns, yeah.
Shoreline towns are
Yeah.
under pressure to do things a little differently.
Yeah, real quickly, the history there is that they've studied that shoreline area for, 50, 60 years or
Right.
more. And basically, a firm did a study, particularly for Westbrook and Saybrook, that said, on-site just isn't gonna make it. But back then, there was nothing innovative and alternative available. And the plan was to build a treatment plant on the Connecticut River that accept the sewage from both Saybrook and Westbrook. And Westbrook voted favorably for that project. Old Saybrook, being the host town, voted it down. And so the state sued them and took it to Supreme Court and actually won. The state won the Supreme Court, suing the town of Old Saybrook, saying you shall install this system. But the way the legal things work for the next 20 plus years, Saybrook fought that. Spent a ton of money on legal fees and obviously never built anything. And then at that point, DEP said, well, we need to do something. And so they came up with this plan to try to fix individual systems like they talked about. Keep in mind that these systems are generally, other than some of the commercial stuff, are generally to fix existing problems on existing lots. They're not made to develop future views to expand your home to 4 bedrooms instead of 3. That's unusual for the state to allow that. It's really to try to do the best you can on your individual, and they're the same way. They have really tiny lots all on the shoreline. At high tide, the water's right at the ground surface. What do you do?
Yeah, he said they've got real concerns there with the groundwater
Oh, absolutely.
table, and there's a
Yeah.
bunch of different
Yeah.
things that are playing
So,
in on that.
Steve, opine on the subject of, did you read any of those CCM suggested
Briefly.
articles?
I didn't have a lot of time
I've
to-
read them briefly too,
Yeah.
but opine on the possibility of going to the state level and convincing them that some of those systems would be permissible.
Yeah, I think it's worthwhile still pursuing it. I mean, again, it's not just West Cornwall, it affects every town in the state practically, kind of thing. So I
I
think
know
it's
we have a
still,
representative from Falls Village here. for
yeah, I
that
think
very
it's still
reason.
worth pursuing that. Whether
Now-
who pursues it, I don't know, but, and the one system you're talking about with the large hotel type of thing, I'm sure you're talking Water's Edge or something else down there.
Yeah, something down there.
Water's Edge is a huge facility down there, condos, everything, banquet facilities, whatever, you know, how the heck did they get this thing done? They're using the same treatment system that we proposed as a possibility for here, that same one at Salisbury School, only at Salisbury School, they don't recycle it. But down there, they recycle, and the same thing with the Westbrook factory stores, we designed that system. And at one point, they were recycling 90% of their renovated water back into the facility for flushing toilets and things. And so their leaching system had to be 10%, 20% of what normally would, because...
You designed that system?
Yeah, not that one, but a large one for the Tang or Westbrook factory stores outlets, but it's the exact same thing. It's a recycling system.
Well, how
essentially.
about the possibility that, you didn't present it to us, but when we spoke a lot about the need for these huge leach fields,
Yeah,
and in these CCM
yeah,
articles, there's lots of discussion about much smaller leach fields.
yes.
So where are you from an expertise point?
Well, there's a
About
couple things. There's a couple things.
I know the state doesn't allow them yet.
Well, but any kind of pre-treatment will reduce the size of the necessary leaching field. The question for West Cornwall is, of course, I mean, some of your properties, there's no area for a leaching field. Thus, you have, I think, you got some systems on other properties, and I mean, like Ian's shop, for example, where would it go? Or the old Fresh Fields restaurant, where would you put a system there? There's no property whatsoever. So it's not a question of just reducing the size of the leaching field. It's fine.
Well, for a community system, though.
For a community
This is what we're talking about.
Yeah. So again,
you cite,
pre-treatment.
IA for the whole community somewhere
Yeah.
that needed much
Yep.
smaller leach.
For example, even if you pre-treat like Salisbury School does, that reduces a leaching field system by, don't quote me on this necessarily, but probably by 50 to 75% reduction in leaching field size, because you pre-treated the wastewater to a very high level, and therefore then the state will allow you to discharge it to a leaching field at a higher what they call loaded rate.
But you
So-
still need that large building to do the.
Yeah, you need something to
IA
pre-treat it. Now, some of these more individual IA type of systems that they're trying to, at one point they tried to pass legislation. It wasn't, I don't think it was specific to the type of technology, but just for the DEP to start allowing it or exploring it like the other states do. That would, again, reduce this leaching field
Now,
size.
Libby, what about that one over in New York State? That's a
Hillsdale.
Hillsdale has an IA system that doesn't involve a large building, doesn't it?
It's underground, I believe, all underground, right?
I don't know, I'm
It's
not
all,
familiar, no.
all underground. I don't believe it has, I think it has a little shed.
Yeah, so I
Like
mean,
a little-
because so far the basic objection to in placing something like this has to do with the physical structure. Am I correct in that? I know there's people in the audience who are here for that.
Location?
It's a location.
So if this thing was flush to the ground, you'd still object to its location?
It would be nice if you could localize it where the problems are underground somehow, if you could do that.
I don't
And
think
fix the systems that are there.
So it's not the size of this
No, we just
massive
don't want
structure,
it
it's just that it's
there going into the river and, no,
nearby.
it's nearby, it's.
But you have no
yeah.
objection to the HVA project, is it?
No, they can fix the parking lot. I wish they would fix the parking lot and the field and, no.
But the problem is, we could not put anything underground there in all likelihood, because that's one of the reasons you got the revised HVA proposal, is because it doesn't require touching the ground. In other words, they'll add soil on top of what's there. They don't want to find out what the problems are underground. So we're not solving anything.
Well,
That one-
unless you committed to a phase 2, and then who knows
Yeah,
what
well,
that costs.
Gordon says that they refuse to do that.
didn't want that.
Yeah,
Well, as long as they own it. It's
well, they're still
possible
gonna
that
own it.
they'll own it.
A quick question, do they own the property almost up to the library here?
Yes.
Yes, so there
This
is-
building has no property.
No
Two-
property.
This
Yeah.
building cannot have a portage on it.
So
This could
whose
be in
property's the
Saybrook.
well?
Not even a portage on
Whose property's the well on?
It's
That
on
property is
Eversource.
Eversource
So
property.
the well's on their property?
Yeah, so
Yeah,
that's,
that, they didn't know that when they did
Yeah.
it. They didn't know that when they did
I
it.
was gonna say, I'm very surprised they allowed that if
They
they're so
didn't
concerned
know.
about
They thought
contamination.
that the agreement for that well
Yeah.
was between this building, Arlington Utzler, and Ann Zinzer, who lived in the Pearlie's
Right.
Cafe.
Yeah,
And that agreement that happened back in whenever that was, they thought Arlington Zinzer, who was the head guy here at the library, thought he was giving somebody the right
yeah,
to library land. Nobody did enough research though to
No.
know that was wrong. That well is on Eversource land and it services Pearlie's.
My thoughts are, I mean, Gordon, you and I talked briefly about this property, the grassy area. It's a decent sized little piece of land, and it
Right.
could possibly put a leaching field in it for a certain number of gallons per day. I'm gonna do a little research on that.
But we
I think
circle
also-
back to the IA system being at the bend. correct?
Well, no, I'm saying, you know, there might be
He's saying
some,
an underground.
right, or, and more of a conventional septic system without pre-treatment possibly. I'm not sure how much, again, it's not a huge piece of land, obviously, but it could take some. And the question.
Is it flood zone?
Oh, that's what I'm gonna have to check, for sure. And then the other question is, you know, how many businesses or whatever could it accommodate, if any? 1, 2, whatever, I don't know. I'll do some calculations for that. But,
Because it seems that's one of the questions I had as another activity, is to say, now that we've done this work, we're looking, even if the town picks up some money, there's still gonna be some money on the users. So, I mean, several thousand a year, and an amount, 5,000, 10,000 to hook up. The hookup charges to a system. So one question I have, because we have heard the opposition, we haven't heard proponents, is it would be good to, over the summer, to get a list of people saying, yes, if you build it, I will hook up. Because that may help define, because I think the number is smaller than we first thought and may shrink.
oh, definitely.
It
I would agree.
will shrink the solution.
Yeah, I think, Ian, you did a poll.
I did.
of your own.
I called everybody on Railroad Square and Main Street and took a poll. And
Right, but I
Yeah,
think
that would be
that's,
interesting.
that's
I've
different than
never-
having
I've never looked
that.
upon this idea as something as simple as satisfying what's existing. Because
Well, that
clearly
was-
there's not very much existing. That's not gonna underwrite this project, ever.
It's still an alternative, because it seems like, again, that
An
there's not
alternative.
everybody in the village wants it. So why design a system for people that don't want it? If we have
Because
three,
there's a
if we
future.
have,
There are people who aren't in this
well,
village right
again,
now.
this, we're talking about here and now, and the future's the
But,
future.
I mean, that's
But
what,
if we can,
that's what
if-
government does all the time. It talks about both the here and now and the future. You can't just,
we designed a school for 250 kids.
right, but also part of the pitch was to keep West Cornwall looking the way it was, which,
Yeah.
I mean, we do have another alternative in Saybrook. If you want to put up a big commercial thing, then if you want a big commercial thing, the big commercial thing pays for it to get rid of its sewer. It's not, doesn't come back on the town, so they have to come up with their own deal if you want to grow. Most of these things the town does address current things that are failing. They are not, the towns are not paying for massive developments in other places. So,
no, but their
again,
infrastructure is sufficient to enable people with some vision and some capital to come in and do good
But-
deeds,
so-
bad deeds as well, but do stuff. Yeah.
I've heard, and I don't know how true it is, that for small rural towns, sometimes the Department of Agriculture, not the state, federal, will jump in and provide some funding. And I wonder if there was any way to look into that, because certainly Cornwall is a small rural town. And I think
Yeah.
even though we have a business
Yeah.
section.
we know
We've
that.
already
They-
done
He
that.
said the
We've done
USDA.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
they-
a
That's the
report.
major grant.
Right, they would give a
Okay.
quarter.
That's the 45.
And there's another aspect of this kind of thinking which came up in that CCM, some of those CCM articles I was reading, which is many of these rural towns, particularly in Maine, in northern Maine, are finding that development is going into the out of town because that's where the land is. And the place where the development ought to be is this is a real issue for them because their small towns are caving in because there isn't enough infrastructure to support a town. And for development purposes, people are finding these larger plots out of town. That's where the so-called sprawl issue arises. So you don't want to abandon your villages if you don't
No,
have
but all
to.
I'm saying is there may be solutions that fix the current problems, which is, it's probably good to at least
Well,
investigate if there is a solution out there.
Right, well,
because-
you've mentioned Ian's building with no
In here.
You've mentioned what
Store.
was the deck
Yeah.
with no property. My building has no footprint whatsoever.
Right.
My old building had no
This
footprint.
building.
This building.
Yeah, there were-
Right.
How many buildings, you're already up to
Post
80%
office.
probably of the,
Store above the post office.
Store above
of the West
The,
Cornwall.
wa-
Haunted house up above.
the Mother's Cafe building.
So I think,
I mean, that goes back to the issue with any kind of innovative alternative technology, no matter how good it is, no matter what state approves it, you still need some property to get the water back into the ground. And so it makes it very, very difficult, just because of what you're saying.
Is this the only property here available to the town?
Well, they were looking at other properties,
well,
but
this is, belongs to Eversource.
Right, but is
Yeah.
there another piece of, like,
Well, we did look
I don't know
up the
if that-
river.
if that piece of property will accept the whole town, like, well, I don't know a lot about it, but I think that everybody, if you wanted to include this little hamlet,
yeah.
you need a bigger piece of property for either a leaching field or a treatment.
Right.
And we
Right.
looked,
Yeah.
this actually brings us to one of the
With the
things Gordon and I
current
felt we ought to discuss a
No
little
laws
bit.
included, just common sense, that if you're gonna gather up all the gallons per day in this
Yeah.
hamlet,
But the
you
thing
need a
is,
piece of property
Right.
that's
but
bigger
So-
then unless you
Oh, absolutely.
pre-treat the water, it like
Even-
that's,
Well, even if you pre-treat.
Even if you pre-treat it, you need something bigger than this, no matter
Right.
how well you treat
Right.
it.
And one of the numbers we've never heard, and you did work these up, was what it would cost to put it up in the field
Right,
up there, so.
correct, yeah.
this-
But again, I was gonna say, well, and then pre-treating it sort of obviates the need of a leaching field.
Right.
I mean, you've got a river here, as the DEP said, is acceptable for that kind of effluent without harming the river. In fact, I think they noted it would probably improve the water quality of the Housatonic. So
Yeah,
that's where it goes back to, do
so
you
that's,
pre-treat or not?
that's in response to a question you guys have brought up, which is you don't want it going into the river. I mean, do you have a
I
opinion
don't know
about that?
why everyone is focusing in on this area, only this area, because you've told us many times there are other alternative places.
Well, this is the cheapest place to do
This is
it,
the cheapest for you, but this is
Not for
supposed to
me.
be a leaching
for
field.
us.
Isn't this a floodplain here?
Well,
You've
there,
got a well here,
he
and
did
my
study
well is
that.
across the street, right by my,
yeah,
inside my
well, he
fence.
has studied that, so that's not a new question.
So it's not a floodplain?
Well, apparently there's an area.
There's
that's-
areas that are not.
That are not.
Where are they?
But towards the road side of things, there's areas that are.
Towards the road here?
Yes,
And my
Yeah,
well
but-
is right across the street.
yeah, we're not talking a leaching field. We're
But
talking,
you said you needed to pre-treat. If you have to pre-treat it, where are you gonna put that building?
well, that's the whole question we've been discussing.
That's
about
that's
building.
where the
And you
building
said-
would go,
you-
and
you
the
just said
outside of the
it's not the
flood.
building that concerns you, it's the fact that you're gonna have some kind of system across the way from your house. It didn't matter if it was underground or not. We understand that, I understand that.
Yeah, I'm not putting you on the spot
No, no,
either,
no.
we're trying.
And we have people that, park there, the kayakers that come once a year, and all the trailers are over there and everything, it's like a recreational.
Right,
spot.
and they would continue to be able to.
Isn't there any other way?
Well, that's what we're
That's
searching
what you're
for, believe
searching
me.
for, but
Yeah.
if you could do smaller areas instead of taking everybody's problem and putting it all in one place, couldn't you divide that up and localize
No, it's
it?
one small building that's smaller than this room. You
But
can't
where would
divide that up into smaller. You've got one set of membranes that filters the water. That processing building is a relatively small building.
And then where would that be?
And it wouldn't, well, to answer your question, the property across the street where the kayakers camp, that all is in the floodplain is on the map that I saw. But a little further south, on the bend where there's a foundation and the land is higher,
Right.
that's not in a floodplain. Neither is the property that my shop is on in a floodplain, even though it's at the same
So
area. I mean,
back
according
to
to the
the
map.
treatment- Back to the building with the treatment and the whole thing in the bend again.
Does Eversource, have they agreed to this? I mean,
To walk to the.
They don't-
Nobody's approached them.
they don't know anything
It's not a
about it?
plan yet, this is just a
It's not a
concept.
plan
Because, I mean, you could go through all this and they could say, no way, right?
Which I think would be pretty likely because they don't want to disturb the land.
Right.
And become subject to the waste products that are there from the scissors factory and the DOT dump that existed on that site.
Right.
That's why, as Gordon said, you're seeing a revised plan from HVA that totally is above the property. It doesn't, you're not gonna disrupt any of the existing land right now. But what's concerning me is we're writing a plan of conservation and development right now. And I was looking at some of the notes from the Economic Development Committee. I mean, somebody better get on board with them because they want to have the septic system. And if you put that in your plan of conservation and development, then your Board of Selectmen and every board in town is committed to follow what they write.
No. They
Well-
said, they have, these are things the town should investigate, and that's what we're doing
But,
now.
right.
And the
but
language
Gordon,
says
right.
they want to improve the current situation, it doesn't bind us to one solution or the other.
But in the
It
courts have
acknowledges-
held that if the plan of conservation and development says something, and later on, some people in town don't like it, the courts have tended to side with what's in the plan of conservation and development. I'm just saying, I
Yeah.
think
I
that now
think-
is the time to be
Yeah,
really
I think
involved
it's
with that.
a very important point, and it behooves us to recognize that the three selectmen of the town sit here today, two on the board, and one, you're at every meeting. And you've collected as much information as the rest of us has as to the general consensus that this is probably something that the town wants to have. Where it goes, what we spend on it, all the rest of it, remains to be decided.
I think deciding what the general consensus is a difficult
Well,
thing to
well,
state.
that's why I turn to you to help it guide
I
us to
don't think
that.
you can state that. I think people, there's a limited amount of townspeople that have attended many meetings or are aware, have studied in it, spoken about it, and there's many people that have no interest yet.
Right.
They may become interested when it gets closer to some kind of plan. They may speak up at that point. When it comes to spending money, they really speak up. But until that time, they're less interested. They leave it to who's ever on the committee, the selectmen, the Board of Finance, the engineers, to kind of do a lot of the work.
But you can't trigger some
I'm not saying
kind
that
of...
there aren't people that are concerned or interested. I think that's certainly true. And they would like to see a solution that works for, for the majority of people involved. And very limited amount of pushback or negative or...
Right, well, you just used a very
disruptive
important word,
people.
the majority of the people involved.
Right.
So we have a solution perhaps that addresses
Well, I
the
don't,
majority of the people involved.
Well, I think you've
I
got,
mean, we have clearly some people who don't like the concept, and that's fine, and when they go into the ballot box,
well,
they ought
I
to be
think that
entitled
what Steve
to
is,
vote on it.
what Steve has done is a very good start. But I think a lot of what we're hearing from people that are near it
Mhm.
and the price would leave some question as to whether,
Well, price is a different subject,
well, it is
because that
part,
hasn't really come up. Mostly what's come up
it
with
is
the
part
people
of,
who've
it is part of
attended
the
this.
discussion though, because
Sure,
there's some
at
kind
some
of,
point when the discussion continues, that perhaps this discussion isn't going to continue. That's my point.
but
Perhaps this is the last meeting we're going to have on
is
this.
there a way you could find out if Eversource would allow such a thing? Before, I mean,
They
that could,
allowed this building to have their septic tank there.
mm,
They did, they gave it the license, they would not give an easement, but they gave a license. They allowed this building, it was all in writing, I have the paperwork.
never.
They said
never
this
decided.
building-
Is it a license? Is
A
that-
license, not an easement.
And
And
is
the
it-
state of Connecticut required an easement. It's just all baloney. And it's all, yes, Eversource said, yes, this building went forward. They got the license, it's signed, I have the
Did
paperwork.
they pay for it, or was it given?
It was given. And then the state of Connecticut requires an easement to be put on the town records.
Right.
Eversource wouldn't give an easement, would give a license. And
So
they,
what did you do?
not state of Connecticut, Torrington Area Health
So what
required
did
an
you do?
easement. Do you need to go to the bathroom right now? You can't.
So you're talking about going forward, but when you put the well there is what I'm asking.
This
Was
is,
it a license?
that was,
that was a long time ago.
that was Arlington Youth
1985,
Club with the well.
1985.
I
That
understand,
was-
you have a license.
No, because they thought that was the library land. Yeah.
So there was no license.
There was no license, it was an agreement between Utzler and Zinzer,
Okay.
believing he was giving up his own land, or the library, yeah. He didn't,
Thank you.
I have a question. So if there's no water treatment down here, what starts happening to people's water wells? Do the leaching fields start getting into
Well,
them?
this is an engineer's.
Yeah, well, that's typically what can happen, but again, we did some testing, but not enough. I mean, that's something, perhaps, we talked about doing some additional well testing to see. My opinion is that if wells are gonna be impacted by septic systems, they would be impacted right now. I mean, these properties have been here for many, many years. It's not like it suddenly fails. Failure occurs underground, it's gonna be almost immediate, so to speak.
Yeah.
Because you've got decent soil that I believe that perk fairly well. So if there was going to be something in the well, it would be there now. But we haven't had the opportunity to test too many drinking water wells.
And we'd encourage everybody to test their wells
Yes.
here and everywhere else.
Absolutely.
Apparently there's a thing on the website where there's free water testing, so there's no,
Yes, sir.
and it's all confidential, so you can test it if you think you have a problem. But, I mean, I'd be curious to have everybody test their well and see what you got.
Yeah, I mean, if I were here, I don't know, well, I certainly want to know what I'm drinking.
It's on the tar engineering.
You know, not only
It's on
bacteria
the
and viruses,
Cornwall
whatever else,
website.
it could be something from the Bend site somehow gets into it. I mean, groundwater flows in mysterious ways. We think it all just goes towards the river, and it probably does, but you don't know.
You're right.
No, you don't know. Depends on the
Well,
elevation.
because the word septic, everybody just thinks of it as septic, but it's a water treatment plant.
Yes,
Yes?
yes.
All right.
Some people call it a water reclamation plant, because it's producing essentially drinking water.
You've actually referred to it as a sewer system, right? If I
Well, a
remember.
sewer system is typically, nomenclature-wise, a sewer system is typically, it could be construed as everything. A collection system and a treatment system, but typically a sewer system is a collection system that gathers the sewage and brings it to a spot. Then you have a treatment system that actually treats it. Whether that's a treatment system, which could be a conventional septic system, or something more mechanical in nature like Salisbury School.
Todd, I think one of the things that I feel we as a committee have never really addressed is whether this is a West Cornwall problem or this is a Cornwall problem.
Well, I think that's kind of what we're trying to ascertain as we move forward here in this meeting as to whether or not we ought to turn over the reins to the selectmen to find a way to ascertain whether it's an issue that the broader Cornwall community is very keen to have solved and addressed. And that speaks to your question about what's Eversource's position on this?
Right.
I perceive that if this were to move forward, clearly there would be issues in addressing what our relationship is with Eversource, because they own the property.
Right.
Now, there's been discussions about them giving Cornwall the property.
No.
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 They
Well,
have-
some of the properties have been, Eversource has, haven't they actually?
No.
Well, okay, let me not get bogged down in that.
They want,
Point
they've had
being-
it assessed for several $100,000 because it's riverfront property. And I think they are responsible to the shareholders, and I don't think
Right.
they
So the
like us,
point
but
being
we're not
that
their
at
favorite
some
shareholder.
point,
We would
at
have
some
probably
point,
the town-
you have to address what our relationship to that, meaning Cornwall's relationship to that piece of property was. You'd have to make a deal with them of some kind. Would it involve the phase two? Would it involve a lease? Would it involve a license? Whatever it is. But clearly that's going to be something. If the town feels this is important enough for us to move forward on, we've had the best concept, the best system, the best design, the cheapest price we can get to, our next hurdle is some relationship
The
with...
fact is, though, that it's private property. It is private property. Whether Eversource owns it, you own it, or some other corporation or business, or somebody's living there. And unless the private property owner agrees to sell it for the highway or the town use of whatever, the only other means is eminent domain. And I don't.
Well, no,
think
there's
that-
such a thing as a license or
Well,
a...
I just
Well,
don't.
it has to,
I mean, somehow
lease
the
or
private
something.
property
it has to be
owner
easy.
has to
Easy.
agree to that.
Yeah, sure,
And
sure.
unless they agree to it, it's not happening.
Of course,
So,
but...
I think that property presents a number of issues or hurdles that will be difficult to overcome. Not necessarily impossible, but difficult.
Right, nobody
It may be the
suggested it was going to be
cheapest-
easy.
It may be the cheapest alternative for our solution, or for the solution being presented, but it may be an impossible alternative.
Okay.
For possible contaminants in the ground. Really have no idea whether they exist or not, and we're probably never going to know. That may be one of the biggest problems and biggest hurdles. The other one is agreeing on a price with, at some level, with the
Yeah, but
property
Richard,
owner.
this kind of a conversation you and I have had about this very committee.
I
Sure, I'm not suggesting there aren't problems, but we've got to move along. We've got to,
know,
do
you're
something.
The committee has moved along. The committee has made great progress. It's gotten a great report. The question is there a different way to go? Can there be some other solution that has come up with some of the articles that have been presented from CCM? Is there a different piece of property in town that could possibly be available? To say that the committee's work is done, I wouldn't, or to hand it to another group, whether that be the selectmen or anyone else. The committee that you chair has as much
vested interest.
interest isn't the word I want. It has as much ability to contact the rest of the community, the rest of the town of Cornwall, as anybody else in town. There's nothing that in your
Charge.
in your charge that says you can't be talking with North Cornwall.
Yeah, but talking is really something that we've done an awful lot of, and that's something I commented on in that letter, is that if it were just this committee, it would vote to put the plant in down there, if it were just this committee. But we don't have those kind of powers, we don't have that kind of mandate. All we can do is make the suggestion to the selectmen, which is pretty much why we were here, that that's our suggestion, and then leave it up to you guys.
Question, Joanne mentioned the plan of conservation and development, which is, kind of the guidebook for the town in the future. When is that supposed to be in place, Joanne, or anybody?
Well, the committee.
It's several years, but I think the committee's going to wrap up their work within a year.
Because, and I don't know, you folks are locally know what they're thinking in terms of West Cornwall, but are they thinking that this should be a, vibrant commercial area, whatever type of thing?
Yes.
Or-
Oh, yeah, we have for many. It was in the 2010 plan.
I mean, because what I'm thinking
It
is,
specifically mentions septic and what they're proposing now.
yeah, so if that plan of conservation development gets approved by the town, that gives you some indication that the town as a whole is in favor of doing something here.
I think people want septic, they just don't want it here.
Yeah, well, it's a NIMBY thing. It's
But-
not my backyard.
Yeah,
People
I mean, I
I've
think
talked
that's
We're all
to,
like that.
That's what I've heard.
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned
Hello?
there was a majority.
Excuse me just a sec, okay? We're trying to conduct a meeting.
I'm trying to talk quietly. I'm sorry.
Okay, maybe you could go outside if you want to talk,
Sure.
or wait your
Okay.
turn to
Yeah.
speak to us all. Thank you. Go ahead.
You've kind of suggested there's a majority enthusiasm for this, and the people I've talked to.
Well, on the committee.
On the committee.
Yeah. I
But
don't,
just Cornwall friends, most of whom wouldn't benefit from this at all and just think it's, crazy idea to,
But if those people check.
Let him
check
finish,
their
Richard.
septic-
Let him finish.
to upset the bucolic New England quaint village that's here. And just think, well, they say it'll never happen because it's just too crazy an idea. Because people go to the Bend all the time for, one reason or another. I mean, it is kind of a tourist spot, the few tourists we get here. Anyhow, I guess I just wanted to throw that in.
I would say also that, to clarify my earlier statement, I think people are aware there are problems here, but I have also heard significant pushback on this particular solution to that problem. So I think the two are related, but they're not synonymous.
Yeah.
So I think it's, and I haven't heard from everybody, but I've heard enough people feel as many people feel strongly against it as feel
Sure.
for it.
It's-
And I think ideally, in resolving problems, we would have a solution that would get a
Yeah,
majority
that's
on
the
board before we
so-called
vote.
elegant solution, and
Right.
I'm all in favor of that, believe me. I mean, it's not a slam dunk, I know that, but when you get to a place in a democracy where you have strong opinions on several sides, the mechanism is a vote. And to me, it feels very much to me like in this town, with this subject, that's kind of where we're at. We've had a lot of time to talk about it, we've had a lot of time to deal with it. We've suffered through 20 years almost of recessionary economic
Well, that's,
activity, and there are some people who feel one way about it, there are some people who feel another way about it. We're getting to a point where you ought to have a vote, and we don't, as a little committee, we're not the ones who can even begin to craft that question.
We could, I mean, I forget what it is, you only need a small number of signatures to present to the Board of Selectmen
Yeah, that's true.
to have
20.
a town vote on something.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been surprised, I mean, I asked to be on this committee, not because I live in West Cornwall, but I just think West Cornwall is sort of the economic heartbeat of our town. Living in Cornwall Bridge, people talk about it being the other center. I mean, it's a through stop on Route 7 and 4. It's not where anybody comes. Nobody sits down with a map and a hotel in New York or in Paris and looking to come to New England and says, well, let's go to Cornwall Bridge. But they say, West Cornwall, that's different. I mean, I'm always amazed at the people at the farmer's market who come from all over the place. I mean, I've just been absolutely stunned. But when I talk to other people now, like people who live in East Cornwall, I mean, East of Jesus, I don't know. They never come to West Cornwall. And they're not in the least bit interested. I've been really surprised at the lack of interest or concern that I've found from people that I've talked to about this project. That's concerning to me. I mean, I really don't know how a vote would go.
No, I don't either. And I'm real curious to find out,
But I mean, it would provide direction.
I don't think we can spend any more time in this committee until we have something definitive on that.
Might it be possible for a smaller, subcommittee to go forward for a while to try to flesh out some of the alternatives?
Yeah, we could change our focus as a committee to do something that might reflect that. I also think it would be real interesting to find out what the state turned down in the way of a bill for innovative alternative other things, and perhaps, Steve, something along those lines, and perhaps your company could design a different system that would sit in a smaller footprint, less aggressive.
I think we should go back to Craig Minor because he's chair of one of the crucial committees, right?
well, there's another good question, Steve. If you didn't have to get a state permit, is there a system or a solution out there that you're aware of that may meet some of these concerns?
The only system that's not going to require require a health code.
Well, I mean, I'm just saying, assuming we could change some of the state regulations, because most
Yeah.
people acknowledge that the state of Connecticut, for a bunch of reasons, is behind
Yeah.
the times. So is there a system that's out there that you know of in other places that could meet some of these concerns without, they would meet the needs without some of addressing these concerns?
You'd have to get permits, whether it was state permits or, is that what you're asking?
Well, I know this, but as an engineer and somebody that's been out in the big world,
Yeah.
do you know of other systems that would work in a community like this? Because I said going down to Saybrook, they probably have more flow out of one hotel than we have out of the entire village.
Right.
So, and again,
You have
if
to
you know
look at-
more than I do,
Yeah, you have
then
to look at the individual solution for the individual property. Like the hotel, for example, they're using recycling as a mechanism to do it. As I went back to the fact of the matter here is that these properties, you still need land area, short of putting it into the river directly, you need land area to do something. You have to get it into the ground physically somehow. And if you have no property to do that, what do you do about it? It's a very difficult.
But we do have property, but it increases the cost significantly.
Oh, I'm not saying that. I'm saying for individual ones, individual properties, for example. And I got a question for you real quickly, and digress a bit here to economic vitality of West Cornwall. Like obviously a lot of businesses and others have moved out of this area. And has that been for economic reasons? Has it been for lack of wastewater disposal, water supply, or is it for a myriad of reasons?
Current area health.
I think it's a variety of different things. I mean, I think West Cornwall has sort of defined itself as a more of a tourist economy, whereas Cornwall Bridge is more of an everyday economy. And so a lot of people in Cornwall feel disconnected from West Cornwall because they don't shop here.
Yeah.
I mean, you may have people come from a long distance here, but that's another whole part. And there is less tourism here. There's less people driving than there was when Houstonic Meadows was full, when there were fishermen. When I was a kid, this whole road would be filled with cars, people going into the river. All those things have changed for various reasons, which have had impact. But obviously, septic is part of it, but not exclusively that. There's other places that have functioning septic systems in Northwest Corner that have a high vacancy rate. All these towns are struggling with their Main Street vacancy rates.
But
Excuse me, just, go ahead, speak to that.
I was just gonna say, just the lack of, I've been here since 75, the lack of Mothers. There's no place to get a drink.
Right.
And the bar.
Mother's
is
Cafe,
great.
not Mother's. Yeah.
I mean, that was.
It looks at me, Patricia, that was-
That's part of it.
Oh, I can't forget my gist, I'm sorry.
You need money. That's exactly
But
what
I think, I'm old fashioned.
Yeah.
I like white wine and Jack Daniels.
There you go.
And except for going home, there's no place in town where I can get that.
That's right.
That could be on the ballot.
But that's a septic thing.
Does
I
the
mean,
town-
that's a septic thing, yeah, because it goes in one end and it comes out the other.
Well,
The answer is that West Cornwall is more seasonally oriented. I think that's what you're saying in terms of being more touristy oriented, and by being more seasonally oriented, they are subject to higher highs and lower lows depending on the season and what happens in that particular season. Good weather, not so good weather. You put a couple of those together and a business or two can go out of business.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's part of the issue. I think the septic is part of the issue because it does make things more difficult for restaurants and bars and
Steve, do you know of any place where they actually use right-of-ways? Because part of my little around the world book shows places where they actually use road right-of-ways and things.
I've heard of that. We have not done anything like that. There's no reason I don't think you couldn't do that.
Well, I mean,
Yeah, like
because right now,
railroad right of way.
well, if you look at-
right of way.
if you look at the
I'm not
land,
sure what
the
we're
town owns a strip right through here that's 50 or 60 feet wide on both sides of the road. The railroad right up the road has something that slopes that way for a very long period of time that's owned by the state of Connecticut. My only question is somebody look at some of those things.
Yeah.
There may be more land
Yeah.
than we know of that's right here.
My leaching fields are alongside the track. I pay the state
So
a
they
rental fee every,
do allow it.
yeah, because when mine failed,
That was the place.
that was the only option.
Uh-huh. Slopes
Yeah,
down,
And
slopes.
Joe
something to look at.
Rostakis is.
Right, it's level, it slopes
Yeah.
that way.
Yeah, what we have to look at again is if you're gonna pre-treat or not pre-treat, and then
Right.
that's a difference in how big that leaching system has to be, depending again how many users you envision. You know, we talked about just looking at the core area, which pretty much the businesses, as opposed to the residential areas around, which nobody has any interest in that, I don't think at this point, if I'm correct. So we'd have to look at, it's like 13,000 gallons a day, and if that's the number, which provides for some future growth, then how much can you spread that out down a railroad right of way or down a town road right of way?
It goes all the way to Danbury.
Yeah, there you go.
I'd like to ask
That's
the people who are
interesting. I've
here,
never heard
who are mainly concerned with the Bend location, how might you feel about another location that wasn't the Bend, not down here where you guys live, but up that way? As for instance, anything on that side of the road, which is clearly out of the floodplain on the map, such as maybe your barn that's right up here, or the toll house, or the land that's up by the locks. They have some property in between their buildings. If the facility was located in a location like that, would that still be a problem for you, those of you who are here?
As long, in my from my opinion, if it was acceptable to the people in that area.
Yeah.
Right, that's the only thing too.
Absolutely,
If it was acceptable to the people
Mhm.
and it was underground,
It wouldn't be, you're saying it.
Well, the building's not underground.
It would go into an existing building, you
No,
know?
but
Well, we're working with a
Building
concept that
Salisbury,
he-
it's
that-
lovely, that's. the
Working
building
with a
is
concept
awesome.
that they came up with, which is an above-ground filtration building where water is filtered
right,
through membranes and all the solids are taken out. And it's a very small building, like I said, smaller than this room, and it can be dressed up just as fancy as this building.
if you could take it out of town and it's not.
We don't
right-
have out of town, we have, trying to localize it to keep the price within the price structure that we have now.
But when you say up the street here, I mean, I don't see any place where you can put it.
Well, this building, if it's not gonna have a septic, if it's not gonna have, it can't have a library here, it might be repurposed, but again, I'm not sure that this one would work because I think that this technically is, this side of the road is in the floodplain, but Lib's building, the barn that's up there, that,
You would fill in more that.
I don't know,
Right there.
I'm just supposing that if you were willing to sell that to this project, that could become a location.
You can be in my backyard.
Couldn't they just go,
The-
if you were to buy that, say the pink house or the property?
Yeah.
Do you have enough room on the land to put it just put it underground and do it like that?
I mean, I'm just throwing that out there because whether or not the committee goes on, that's one of the things that we could try to develop as an alternative location.
I just think it's kind of weird to have your treatment in the middle of town.
I agree.
You know, it's
Well,
not-
it's also-
The
also-
idea of it is off-putting,
Right,
you know,
well-
that's why we don't want.
That's why we
Yeah.
don't want it.
But it's also valuable real estate. Once you get into the middle of town, that's a piece of property that's developable. You don't want to be,
I mean, you think you
Putting
have
a
enough
per-
treatment
A
for
person
your
not mowing
tourist
their lawn and
attendant.
not painting their buildings or keeping a roof on creates a more objectionable
Right.
building than this building.
No one seems to be
This
bothered by
building's
the
a publicly
paint.
maintained
Until we
building,
did
it will
something.
always have paint
That,
and a roof.
those two items compared, yes, but I just think in general that this thing should be
It should
out
be
of sight.
out of sight, out of town. And I know you don't want to pump it but then somebody was talking about Trinity, that's pumping it up a steep hill. Even if they did, and that would cost a lot of money.
The
I mean, isn't
on-site,
there a way you
Right,
can
you-
go out of town and?
I've often felt you might be able to carve out a little piece of Trinity's property. We've never really approached them.
Why,
Yeah, we
why
Yeah,
not?
pump-
I'm wondering.
Well, pumping is not that big a deal anymore, according to our engineers.
So why,
Dollars and cents.
I mean, why wouldn't that be part of this focus group to ask Trinity?
Well, we have.
Do you want to do a
Gordon
good
has
We
thing
have
for the
some.
town?
They did ask.
tried.
They did.
A little bit.
And,
Maybe
and they
more
said
is
they,
needed.
it's not in their planning,
Right,
they're set.
right. They just,
And that
they
was
just
like
renovated
full
their,
stop?
well, they
For
just
now.
renovated their.
I mean, they're busy trying to come back to life, so I thought it was a little bit grand. Welcome to Cornwall, take our crap. You know, I mean, there's so much you can do, you know? So I didn't put it in those terms, but I said, do you see a need in the next several years for something like that? And they said, not in the next several years, and we're pulling our planning together. We're just trying to make sure our model we're using right now is viable.
But
In
what
my-
about just
in-
as a generous gesture?
Well, I think they're
To
being,
West Cornwall.
I think they're being very generous right now by coming back to life and employing a lot of local people. I don't
Yeah.
think it's my job to stand them up just because
Not
they
yet, it's too
are
early.
here.
But it
but-
might be the elegant solution. It really might be, so.
I didn't mean to say that about Trinity, because I wasn't talking.
No, no,
I was
but
just trying to get to the.
it did trigger the
getting out of
conversation.
town.
so.
But you mentioned many times, you know, when everyone said, we really don't want it here in the middle of town, you said, we're gonna try to find another solution. We'll try to find another way. And it seems like you keep spitting the bend. And you could you go up to the fields that you were saying somehow and not go through somebody's
Well,
property?
actually, I keep coming back to this, and Steve has worked up the numbers for going up the field. We have, I mean, he didn't feel comfortable enough to show them. How do you feel about talking about
It
it?
was, I think we talked about it being an additional $1 million or more, I believe. Do you recall that, anybody?
That's not much when you think
I-
about it.
No, no,
You got
no.
a million,
No.
million and a half, I think.
No.
Is that down the river?
Yes,
And that's before the 40%.
that's before the 40%. I have a total cost of almost $6 million for the core system, which I think the core system was more like
Going up to the.
going up there. The core system, I think before, more in the range of 3 million.
Yes.
And
without-
don't
without
forget, there
agreeing.
are neighbors up there too.
That's what I was
but,
gonna
I
ask.
mean,
So
at
it's
some
almost
point,
more
Did
than
we
a
have to go
Yeah,
through?
talk.
differential.
All right, so
Which if
then-
someone else is paying the tab, that's great, but if the town as a whole or the individual businesses and residents have to pick up a portion of that, then that's a,
Well, I would ask.
So
this-
how would that work? We'd be assessed individually of thousands and thousands?
Well, there'd have to
of
be a sewer district that would come into being, and then the sewer district would levy fees on the people in the district.
whether they wanted to be part of it or not?
I believe so.
what typically happens is, again, we talked about this in many, many meetings, it's called a benefit assessment. And what you do is you take the total cost of the project, subtract the grant monies, and you have a net project cost, which then has to be divided up by the properties that benefit from the system, quote unquote, the system.
Right.
And most towns, if not all towns, if there's a sewer line that you can utilize goes in front of your property, then you get assessed a portion of the cost of the project because your property benefits from it. Whether you connect up to the sewer or not is another question. But the property benefits from having sewers in front of it, so the property's worth more. And so the state, in its infinite wisdom, has said, you know, the town can assess these properties for the cost of that. What we talk about here, though, is not going near the residential areas so much, but really trying to focus on the core commercial sort of quote-unquote area of town, because it seemed to us, or me anyway, that the residential folks in the outskirts had zero interest in paying for this and zero interest in.
Right, which is the majority of West Cornwall, right?
Not really, it's about half and half when you come down to the flow gallons per day type of numbers. So it's pretty similar. But I think the numbers we computed for the core area was around 13,000 gallons per day, and I think for the total system was something in the order of 26,000 gallons per day for everybody. So it's about half and half between the core area and then the residential areas. So,
And this has always been one of the critical issues in West Cornwall, is that there are sort of disparate agendas of the people who occupy the space here. There's a group who are interested in economic development, and there are a group who want a quiet residential setting. And it makes for a very difficult economic journey. And back in 2007, when we started the work on the Plan of Conservation and Development, I posed the question, should we let West Cornwall go residential and stop having a commercial setting in here? Because it's virtually an impossible task to run a business in this little town.
Right.
And the town overwhelmingly said, we want this to stay the way it is, which means a mix of commercial and residential. So here we are.
I have a question. So say your bar wanted to come in, and could they put in their own septic?
If they have the property.
Not in this
but-
building.
No, like, let's say
If you-
Barbara's building.
Well, if you want it, well, that's
No.
different. If you wanted to bring back mothers, you could have a bar there, right
But
now.
you'd have to pump every 3 months.
Well, you'd be under
Yeah.
some sort of restriction
Yeah.
on hours of use, but you could do that. And
I was asking
right
if
now,
you
if you
could-
wanted to put in
A new
something,
system,
Yeah,
like the pink house.
yeah,
They could put a new
you
system.
can get one there,
Yep.
I see, but you have to pay for it,
You
correct?
have to pay for it, yep.
I see.
But
But not every
Barbara's-
property can
But
do that, right?
Barbara's
Pottery
building
store
doesn't have
can't.
enough land. We're talking about the old
Okay,
bookstore.
so that's.
No,
kind of-
Barbara can't, no, she doesn't
Barbara
know
can't.
where her septic is. She literally doesn't know where her
Right.
septic is.
I see,
So
so,
it is gonna, it's for sale yet or not?
not yet,
Right, so it can't be, it could be,
I see. I was just wondering, like, which
like the
properties
deck, like
have-
the building
would have to look
that
at
had
this.
the deck can't be the deck again.
Right,
Right.
I see, okay.
It can't, it's too late. If it still was a restaurant, it would be, probably be grandfathered. I don't know if they ever intervened, but it can't
not
be
unless
that.
it's a problem. They were pumping, correct? They were filling the
Yeah.
tank and pumping it.
That wasn't the reason they went out of business.
Right.
Now, residentially, the field y'all are talking about down the
Yeah.
river, there's not as many houses, and there's nothing right across from that, right?
There might be one or two houses in that vicinity.
But it's
Yeah.
not like where people
No.
come tourist
Right,
wise.
no. Right, I would say I would agree with that.
Okay.
Yeah, they always take a right at the bridge.
I'm just trying to get things in.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I was just talking to Ralph Zanudis, and he was just saying, it's just, pit septic, that's the answer.
Pit septic?
Yeah,
that?
which is a silo placed in the earth, and that's what you're talking about, that's what mothers could do, right? I mean,
Mothers?
the bar.
The old shop in Railroad Square.
And you get an alarm when it's time to.
Yeah,
Oh, and you just,
No, that would not be allowed today.
That's
tanks.
not allowed today though.
Just
That's
tanks.
the old, it's a cesspool, is
Cesspool.
what you need.
Or even if it was a sealed tank, they wouldn't let them do it.
Right, that's old fact. In the old days they could, but Torsionary Health wouldn't allow you to.
It's not a permanent solution because it's very easy to circumvent that system and all of a sudden they've got a pipe direct into the river or who knows what could happen. They don't want any part of that type of system any longer, nor the DEP or nor the health district. And if the restaurant, what I call it fresh field and out with something else, they were grandfathered in.
Yeah, no, we're probably more likely to come up with modern solutions based on what the state turned down.
What was also interesting talking to the people in Saybrook was that they actually integrate their septic solutions into their landscaping and into their architecture of their building. So what you think is the garage at that nice yellow building is actually a sewer treatment plant. So I think, again, maybe part of the learning process is to image some of these things and
Right.
think. So.
In the meantime,
Yeah.
we're, as you know, we're working with Norfolk. It's a totally different subject, different issue, but we're working with USDA up there, and we're about to find out what we're getting for grant and loan. I think we're right in the cusp of that after answering 50 million questions for them. So I'll have a better idea of what grant monies might be available in terms of percentage.
What
You know,
kind of
estimated-
system are they looking at?
Well, they're a different thing. They have an existing 1800s system that's the other side of the thing, They have a system that was built in the late 1800s and it needs entirely to be replaced. So they're facing a hefty bill just to replace the collection system and then the treatment plant needs work. But they're under order from DEP to do that. So,
It's already in place.
yeah.
Did somebody donate that?
Todd, what about us?
I don't know if they donated it, but some industrialists, someone
Yeah.
lived up in that area, I think,
Right.
put a lot of money into it, yeah.
That's what happened to not to go sidebar,
The
but
old, yeah.
the water company in Falls Village, somebody donated the whole thing,
Yeah,
paid for it.
yeah. You can get that here.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's not totally out of the question. Once we
No,
get
no,
on the other
just gotta
side,
find a
does the
solution.
does the town want it or doesn't the town want it?
Right.
That's what I think we need to find out. So guys, we've really come to the place where we have to decide where we're going. I mean, do we want to pick this up again in September? Do we want to function as a committee like this? Do we want to wait till the selectmen have the meeting and do some head scratching and
I'd say just
and return?
meet in September.
Okay, we have
First
one.
Tuesday
Meet in September.
Gives us.
You have a feeling one way or the other? Or?
I don't see it. I mean, it's like banging your head against the wall. I mean.
It'll fall eventually.
Yeah. That's a good purpose.
Priscilla, are you
I'm optimistic,
okay?
so I would like to continue.
I mean, there's some things that we can be doing and Gordon can be doing in the interim period to try to look at some of these other things.
All the stuff that was proposed
Right.
to us today, we could
Yeah.
all go
A little
home,
more research. on
study it and find out what
Yeah.
the best option with that would be.
So our agenda, we met part of our agenda, our mission statement, which was to examine with assistance from Goldman York, who are a long-going group in Torrington Area Health, who did help us, the current limitations of the water septic systems in the village of West Cornwall. Also to advise the Board of Selectmen and the town on practical improvement alternatives and the procedures to implement these possible alternatives. So I think we've satisfied that charge. I really feel that we ought to wrap up this group. I'd like to have a vote on this, and that part of the vote will be to turn this back to the selectmen and have them, as I said, scratch their heads and talk about this, and if they want to re-empanel us with a new charge or some new direction, that's fine, we'll do that. But I think we're done with what we set out to accomplish. So, how does that sit with people.
Then you gotta write a report.
I'll be happy to write it.
Don't worry.
I think it sort of sounds to me that that it would be the court has made a ruling, and then it gets, somehow, it ends up at the next level of court, and they say, yeah, well, whatever, they're gonna hand it back down to the
Well,
original court.
if that's what you
Say,
want
"Do
to
it
do.
again.
court,
Do it
settle,
again."
solve that.
Yeah, do it again, right, exactly.
That's kind of,
Because I don't see any kind of way forward at this juncture.
I'm for putting that vote off until September.
Okay.
To September, we'll have one meeting in September to decide whether to kibosh this committee and reform as another something or. But it would give us the 2 months to try to research and.
Right,
address
let's
that
do
stuff.
some summer reading and reconvene in September and maybe revisit where we're headed. And in the meantime, maybe the selectmen can help us, point us in a direction. Okay. That sound like a good place to end for the summer, guys?
You want to have a motion to do that?
A motion to.
Motion to have
We
a
have to
meeting
pick
on
a
the
date in September.
first Tuesday.
September 11th. We can go
Yeah,
over.
we have a meeting scheduled actually, so we'll stay on the scheduled meeting. We'll reconvene September 11th, specifically to talk about, once again, the future of the committee.
I can go home
Were you at Porches?
last night,
So that's your
Well, I can-
motion and Libby's second?
second this weekend, last night I did BBC.
Oh,
Yeah, should we can you read what you wrote, what we said? Make sense of what we said?
Okay, well, I was reading what Ian had said originally, I
Okay.
guess, was that we hold off and make a decision about the future of the committee on September 11th at our next regularly scheduled meeting.
So now is there discussion on that or do we just vote on it?
If you want to discuss it, discuss
Does
it.
that even require a motion, Gordon?
Well, they're on a roll, so let's keep it going.
Sorry.
Keep it going. You're doing well. Doing well.
I
Keep it going.
definitely wanted it aired. I wanted to talk about it. I wanted to hear some opinions and feedback on it. You would like
One thing that I would like to
have some
happen
discussion.
over the summer is that maybe you as the chairman or, some member of this committee appear before the subcommittee on economic development for the POCOG,
Okay.
so that things don't get written that,
Can't be found.
are gonna be a problem for them and for any future committee and for the town. I think they're uninformed.
Who's on that committee?
It's Anna Tamel as the subcommittee head.
I don't think
Gordon,
he's
you don't
uninformed.
agree?
What?
You don't agree?
No, we talked about it last night. I don't think
Yeah,
I don't think
spoke
they're
with Anna
uninformed
just a
in
couple
there.
of days ago.
It's in there. It's in the mix. So, I mean, I'm sure they're glad to see Todd, but they are informed.
I would like something to happen on that specific issue over the summer. Not letting it get too far down the road without hearing at least where we are.
I'll go to a meeting for sure and weigh in
Thank
on
you.
my opinion.
I did that. Didn't the Chronicle just ask us to do that? The Cornwall Chronicle asked us to put in our, to both Anna and to,
Well, that was Anna's letter. and I
Emily's,
think-
that was Emily's article or Emily Pryor's article? you're talking
yes. And I did have an email exchange with Anna and whoever the guy is.
about? Bill Goulet.
No,
Oh, no,
John,
no.
That's not
Jake
right.
LaPorta.
Yes, James.
But
Yeah.
I still,
Isn't James?
yeah, I still think that there should be an appearance at the meeting and more of an in-depth solution.
Right, but it might also be something for the selectmen to tell them about because
I did.
yeah. he
Last
says-
night, we put it in there.
Said he has.
Relax.
Okay, so,
So, do we need a vote on this,
All in
or you say we're on a roll, but
Yeah, I
but
would
we have
vote.
a
Why
meeting
not?
scheduled. Let's
There you
just-
go.
Let's just meet in September and revisit in 2
Not gonna vote.
Make a
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second. Ian, adjourn. Libby, second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you all for coming.
Todd,